When I first married Daniel, I knew that his family was going to be a challenge. Not because they were cruel or distant, but because they had their own long-established traditions and expectations. Coming from a different background, I tried my best to blend in, but no matter how hard I tried, my mother-in-law, Margaret, always found a way to make me feel small. She was the type of woman who believed that her ways were the only right ways, and anyone who dared to do things differently was wrong in her eyes. Still, for the sake of peace, I tried to smile and stay polite, even when it stung. Daniel, to his credit, often defended me. He loved me deeply and constantly reassured me that his family would eventually come around. Just give them time, he'd say, brushing my hair back with that gentle look in his eyes. But sometimes I wondered how much time it would take. After all, every family dinner turned into an unspoken competition, every gesture I made was quietly judged, and every word I spoke seemed to be weighed on Margaret's invisible scale of approval. And somehow, I always fell short. The moment that truly tested me came during Thanksgiving. It was the first holiday I had been invited to host at their family home alongside Margaret. She insisted that she would prepare the main dishes, while I was allowed to make something on the side. Her tone when she said it told me everything. She didn't trust me in the kitchen, not when it came to impressing her relatives. I agreed anyway, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if I put my heart into my dish, they might see me differently. Cooking had always been a passion of mine. Long before I met Daniel, I had taken professional culinary classes and even worked briefly in a restaurant kitchen. It wasn't just about recipes to me. It was about creating flavors that told a story, food that brought people together. So when Margaret told me I could bring one dish, I poured my entire soul into it. I decided to make a special roasted butternut squash risotto, rich, creamy, and perfectly balanced with herbs. It was a recipe I had perfected over years, one that had always left my friends in awe. The day of Thanksgiving arrived, and the house was buzzing with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of silverware. The dining table was overflowing with Margaret's cooking, golden turkey, honey-glazed ham, her famous mashed potatoes, and dozens of side dishes that she proudly announced as her creations. I set my risotto carefully on the table, garnished with fresh thyme and shavings of Parmesan. For a moment, I felt proud, even hopeful. But as soon as Margaret saw it, her lips curled into a smirk. "Well," she said loudly enough for the entire table to hear, "I suppose everyone needs to start somewhere. At least it looks edible." The room fell silent for a second before her sisters chuckled quietly. My face burned, but I forced a smile. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, trying to reassure me, but the damage was already done. My dish was dismissed before anyone had even tasted it. Throughout dinner, I noticed that my risotto sat untouched. Everyone piled their plates with Margaret's food, complimenting her endlessly, while my dish was passed around like an afterthought. At one point, Margaret even pushed the serving spoon deeper into the bowl, whispering to her sister, "It's too heavy for such a delicate meal. Doesn't she know better?" My chest tightened, but I refused to let tears fall. Instead, I focused on chewing slowly, listening to conversations, and pretending not to hear. The humiliation hit harder when Daniel's cousin, Charlotte, asked innocently, "Who made this risotto? It smells amazing." Before I could answer, Margaret quickly interrupted. "Oh, that? Just something our dear daughter-in-law attempted. She's still learning." The word "attempted" stung like a slap. Charlotte gave me a small, kind smile, but I could feel the judgment hanging in the air. I wanted to vanish right there at the table. After dinner, as everyone gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert, I excused myself to help clean up. Alone in the kitchen, I stared at the nearly full bowl of risotto, untouched and unappreciated. My chest ached with humiliation. I had poured hours into that dish, and it was reduced to nothing more than a punchline for my mother-in-law's superiority. I felt my confidence crack, piece by piece, as if all my skills and efforts meant nothing in this house. But fate has a strange way of turning things around. Just as I was about to pack up the risotto and throw it away, Daniel's younger brother, Ethan, walked into the kitchen. He was a quiet type, not one to get involved in family drama, but that night he surprised me. "Hey," he said softly, spooning some risotto into a small bowl. "Mind if I try this? I didn't get a chance earlier." I nodded, trying to mask my embarrassment. Ethan took a bite, then another, his eyes widening with each spoonful. "Wow," he whispered, almost to himself. "This is incredible. Like, restaurant-level good." My heart skipped a beat. No one had said that all night. Before I could respond, Ethan filled another bowl and carried it out to the living room. "You guys need to try this," he announced casually. Everyone turned as he set the bowl on the coffee table. "Seriously, it's amazing." At first, no one moved. Margaret shot him a sharp glare, clearly displeased that attention was shifting away from her desserts. But then Charlotte leaned over, curious, and took a bite. Her eyes lit up. "Oh my God! This is delicious. Who made it?" Ethan glanced at me, and before Margaret could interject again, he said firmly, "She did. Our sister-in-law." All eyes turned to me. My cheeks burned, but this time it wasn't from shame, it was from sudden, unexpected validation. Within minutes, everyone was trying the risotto. Compliments flowed like a tide I hadn't expected. "This is amazing. It's so creamy, how did you get it like this? I've never had risotto this good before." Even Daniel's stoic uncle, who rarely praised anyone, nodded with approval. For the first time that evening, I felt seen. Margaret, however, sat stiffly on the couch, her smile frozen, her knuckles white as she gripped her teacup. It was only the beginning. The room's energy shifted once people realized who had actually cooked the risotto. It was as if a curtain had lifted, and suddenly, I wasn't just Daniel's wife who tried. I was the woman who had quietly brought something extraordinary to the table. Compliments poured in, and though I accepted them humbly, I could feel Margaret's disapproval radiating across the room like heat from a furnace. She kept her lips pressed together, smiling stiffly, as if every word of praise for me was an insult to her. Daniel noticed it too. He leaned in close to whisper, "See? I told you they'd come around." His words warmed me, but I wasn't naive. I knew Margaret wouldn't let this moment slide so easily. She thrived on control, and losing it, even over something as small as a side dish, was unacceptable to her. Still, I savored the moment, holding on to the rare validation I had earned. For the first time since marrying into this family, I felt like maybe I belonged, even if Margaret resented it. Later that night, as everyone prepared to leave, Charlotte hugged me tightly. "You have real talent," she whispered. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words sank deep into me, like a seed planted in soil I'd nearly given up on. Ethan also gave me a quick nod of respect before heading out the door, a silent acknowledgement that meant more than he knew. When the house finally grew quiet, I expected Margaret to retreat to her room in silence. Instead, she cornered me in the kitchen. Her smile was sharp, too sharp to be genuine. "Well, congratulations," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You managed to impress them with one dish. But don't fool yourself, dear. One recipe doesn't make you a cook. And it certainly doesn't make you family." Her words cut deep, sharper than any knife. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, but Daniel walked in just then, and Margaret's expression softened instantly, transforming into her usual mask of politeness. "Good night, darling," she said sweetly to him before retreating upstairs. For the next few weeks, the incident lingered in the air like smoke. Whenever family members visited, they brought up my risotto. "Are you going to make it again? You should write down the recipe. That was the best dish at Thanksgiving." Each time, I caught Margaret's jaw tighten ever so slightly. She tried to brush it off, redirecting the conversation back to her cooking, but the more they praised me, the more her composure cracked. Daniel noticed it too, though he often tried to downplay it. "She'll get over it," he said. But something in my gut told me she wouldn't. Then came Christmas. Margaret, determined to reclaim her throne, announced that she would host the holiday dinner at her home, where she controlled every detail. "This year," she declared, "we'll have a proper feast." I was quietly relieved not to have to contribute. After all, I didn't want another round of humiliation. But a week before the dinner, Charlotte called me. "Please," she said, "you have to bring your risotto. Everyone's been talking about it. It wouldn't be Christmas without it." My heart raced. Part of me wanted to say no, to avoid Margaret's wrath. But another part of me longed to stand tall, to show that my dish hadn't been a fluke. So I agreed. On Christmas Day, I prepared the risotto again, this time with even more care. The aromas filled my kitchen, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. Daniel helped me carry it into Margaret's house, and I could feel her eyes narrow the moment she saw it. "Again?" she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. "How predictable." I ignored her jab and set the dish down among the spread. But unlike Thanksgiving, something unexpected happened. People went straight for the risotto first. Plates were piled high with it, compliments flying left and right. Margaret's turkey, though beautifully roasted, was hardly touched in comparison. I watched as her proudest dish sat nearly full while mine disappeared spoonful by spoonful. She tried to keep smiling, but her eyes betrayed her. Every compliment I received chipped away at her pride. And then, the unthinkable happened. Daniel's father, a man notoriously loyal to Margaret's cooking, leaned back in his chair and said, "I think this risotto might be the best thing I've eaten in years." The room erupted in agreement. Margaret's face turned pale. After dinner, when the family gathered for gifts, I excused myself to the kitchen to catch my breath. I leaned against the counter, trying to process everything, when I heard the door swing open. Margaret stood there, her eyes blazing with suppressed fury. "Do you think you're clever?" she hissed. "Sneaking into this family with your fancy little dishes, trying to outshine me? Let me make something very clear, I built this family's traditions. I am the heart of these gatherings. You will never replace me." Her words sent chills down my spine. For a moment, I considered apologizing just to defuse her anger. But then I remembered the years of biting my tongue, the humiliation, the dismissive comments. Something in me hardened. "I'm not trying to replace you," I said quietly but firmly. "I'm just being myself. If they happen to like what I make, that's not my fault." Margaret's eyes narrowed dangerously, but before she could reply, Daniel's voice called from the living room. She straightened her posture, forcing a smile, and swept past me as if nothing had happened. That night, as we drove home, I debated whether to tell Daniel what had happened. But a part of me worried it would only create tension between him and his mother. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something bigger. Margaret wasn't going to let me quietly rise in her world. She was preparing for a battle, and deep down, I knew I had to be ready for it. In the weeks after Christmas, the tension between Margaret and me became harder to ignore. Though she never openly confronted me again, her disapproval seeped out in little ways. She would leave me out of group texts about family plans, or she'd forget to mention important details until the last moment. When we did see each other, her compliments were edged with barbs. "Oh, you made dinner for Daniel? How sweet. I'm sure it was edible." It was her way of reminding me that no matter how much the rest of the family praised me, in her eyes, would always fall short. Daniel noticed the subtle digs, though he often brushed them off. "That's just how she is," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "Don't let it get to you." But I couldn't help it. Every remark chipped away at me, and every cold glance reminded me that I was intruding on a world she had ruled for decades. At the same time, though, I couldn't ignore the way the rest of the family was beginning to see me differently. Ethan stopped by our house one evening just to ask for cooking tips. Charlotte called regularly, begging me for recipes. Even Daniel's father dropped hints about wanting me to cook for smaller family gatherings. Margaret might have resented me, but slowly, her family was gravitating toward me. The turning point came in early spring, when Daniel's cousin announced her engagement. A lavish engagement party was planned, and Margaret, of course, volunteered to handle the catering. It was her chance to reclaim her spotlight, and she made sure everyone knew it. Invitations went out, menus were drafted, and she barely acknowledged me during the preparations. I expected nothing less. But a week before the event, disaster struck. Margaret came down with a severe case of the flu. She was bedridden, weak, and unable to cook a thing. For the first time in years, her grip on the family's kitchen slipped. Panic spread quickly. Without Margaret, who would handle the food? The engagement party was too important to cancel, and catering from outside was too expensive for the family's budget. That was when Charlotte suggested it. "Why don't we ask her?" she said, looking directly at me. The room went silent. Margaret's face twisted in horror from the couch where she lay bundled in blankets. "Absolutely not," she croaked, her voice raspy. "This is my responsibility. I will not have her take it from me." But the family ignored her protests. They looked at me with pleading eyes, and before I could even hesitate, Daniel's father said firmly, "She can do it. I've tasted her food. It will be perfect." So it was decided. For the first time, I was placed in charge of preparing a family event. Not as Margaret's helper, but as the lead. The responsibility was overwhelming, but exhilarating. I spent days planning the menu, choosing dishes that balanced tradition with creativity. I wanted to respect their customs but also bring something fresh to the table. When the day of the engagement party arrived, I worked tirelessly in the kitchen, every dish a labor of love. The aromas filled the house, and as guests arrived, their excitement was palpable. The meal was a triumph. Guests raved about every dish, from the herb-crusted chicken to the roasted vegetables and, of course, the signature risotto that had now become my calling card. Compliments poured in so quickly that I could barely keep up with the gratitude. Daniel beamed with pride, standing by my side the whole evening. And though Margaret sat in a corner, pale and silent, she couldn't stop the tide of praise that swept through the room. Her era of unquestioned dominance in the kitchen had ended that night. But victory came with consequences. The next day, Margaret summoned Daniel and me to her house. She sat stiffly on the sofa, her color returning, her eyes sharp with anger. "You," she said, pointing at me, "have overstepped. That was my place, my role in this family. And you've stolen it from me." Her voice trembled with fury. I opened my mouth to respond, but Daniel cut in. "Mom, no one stole anything. She helped because you couldn't. You should be grateful." Margaret's eyes flashed. "Grateful? For being replaced in my own family? You've let her make a fool of me." Daniel's face hardened, a side of him I rarely saw with his mother. "No one is replacing you, Mom. But maybe you need to realize that other people can contribute too. She's my wife, and she deserves respect." His words hung in the air like a crack of thunder. Margaret's expression faltered, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. She turned her gaze to me and hissed, "You'll never be me. You'll never run this family." Then she stormed out of the room, leaving an icy silence behind. That confrontation changed everything. Margaret began pulling away, skipping smaller gatherings, retreating into her own world. At first, I thought it might be a blessing, less conflict meant more peace. But soon, I realized her absence was leaving fractures in the family. Without her constant presence, the gatherings felt different. People looked to me for leadership, for organization, even for the cooking. And while I embraced it, I also felt a pang of guilt. Margaret's resentment was deepening, and I worried that one day, it would erupt into something far worse than sharp words. That storm came sooner than expected. Daniel's father announced a grand family reunion for the summer, a tradition that had been carried on for decades. It was usually Margaret's proudest moment of the year, the time when she showcased her cooking to the extended family. But this time, all eyes turned to me. "You should handle the food," Charlotte suggested eagerly. "Your dishes bring everyone together." Others nodded in agreement. Even Daniel's father supported the idea, saying, "You've proven yourself. This year, it's your turn." Margaret's face that evening was unforgettable. She tried to mask her outrage with a tight smile, but her eyes burned with fury. "No," she said sharply. "This reunion has always been my responsibility. I won't have it stolen from me." The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Finally, Daniel spoke up. "Mom, no one is stealing anything. We're just saying it's time to share the responsibility. She's part of this family too." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line, and without another word, she excused herself, leaving the rest of us to sit in uneasy silence. In the days leading up to the reunion, I prepared tirelessly. I wanted to honor the family's traditions while also bringing something fresh and memorable. I planned a menu that included dishes Margaret had always served, but with slight twists that reflected my own style. Daniel supported me every step of the way, reminding me that I wasn't trying to replace his mother, I was simply trying to add to the family's legacy. Yet still, a knot of dread sat heavy in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret wouldn't go quietly. The reunion day arrived with sunshine, laughter, and the hum of dozens of relatives filling the backyard. Tables were lined with food, each dish arranged with care. My risotto took center stage, alongside roasted meats, fresh salads, and delicate desserts. The air was thick with the aromas of herbs and spices. Guests flocked to the tables, piling their plates, and soon the compliments began rolling in. "This is incredible. Who made this? I've never tasted anything like it." Each word of praise was like fuel, strengthening my resolve. But then, as I was refilling platters in the kitchen, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Margaret." She stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You've done well," she said quietly, almost too quietly. I froze, unsure if it was genuine praise or another backhanded remark. Before I could respond, she stepped closer, her voice sharpening. "But don't mistake their admiration for permanence. Families are fickle. They'll turn on you the moment you falter. And when they do, they'll come back to me. They always do." Her words struck me like a blow, but before I could reply, Ethan walked in, carrying empty dishes. He paused, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes darting between us. Margaret quickly plastered on a smile. "Nothing at all, dear. Just giving her some advice." But Ethan didn't look convinced. He lingered a moment before leaving, and I knew he'd heard enough to suspect the truth. As the evening wore on, the praise continued to pour in, and the food disappeared faster than I could replenish it. Eventually, Daniel's father stood and raised a glass. "To our family," he said, his voice strong and warm. "And to the one who made this reunion possible with her incredible cooking, our daughter-in-law." The cheer that followed was deafening. Glasses clinked, laughter erupted, and I felt my cheeks flush with pride. But in the corner of my eye, I saw Margaret's face pale. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Enough," she snapped, silencing the room. "You all act as if she's the savior of this family, as if a few fancy meals make her more important than the woman who built these traditions from the ground up. Have you all forgotten everything I've done for you?" Her voice trembled with rage and hurt, and the room fell into stunned silence. My heart pounded as every eye turned between us, waiting for someone to respond. Before I could speak, Daniel stepped forward. "Mom," he said firmly, his voice calm but unyielding. "No one has forgotten what you've done. We all respect you. But respect doesn't mean no one else can contribute. She's part of this family, and she deserves recognition too." His words rang out like a verdict, and murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but instead of softening, she turned them into daggers. "You've betrayed me," she whispered. "All of you." And with that, she stormed out of the house, leaving the reunion in stunned silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Ethan spoke up. "She'll come around. She just needs time." But I wasn't so sure. Margaret's pride had been wounded in front of the entire family, and wounds like that didn't heal easily. Still, the rest of the evening carried on, laughter returning slowly, warmth filling the spaces she had left behind. And though a part of me ached for the fracture between us, another part of me finally felt free. In the weeks that followed, things began to shift permanently. Family members came to me for recipes, for help with gatherings, for advice on meals. I never flaunted it, never tried to rub it in Margaret's face, but the reality was clear: they now looked to me for the role she had once monopolized. Margaret, meanwhile, withdrew even further, avoiding gatherings altogether. Daniel visited her often, trying to mend things, but she remained distant. I knew that no matter how hard I tried, she might never accept me. But here's what I learned: I didn't need her approval to know my worth. I didn't need her validation to see that I was capable of standing tall in this family. The humiliation I once endured at her table had led me to discover strength I didn't know I had. And though Margaret may never forgive me for outshining her, the truth was undeniable: her family had discovered who I was, and they embraced me for it. For the first time since marrying Daniel, I no longer felt like an outsider. I felt like family.